week, and it's Friday morning already here on the Gary Sutton Show, and what a week it has been. By the way, we always have What's in Your Mind Friday. I'm going to change that. It's called What Are You Thinking? What are you talking about on Main Street? And we're going to have that every Friday from now on. I've decided to change the name. I just didn't like it. And I think I'd like to know what you're thinking. Everywhere you go right now, people offer their thoughts to you, and you're seeing more and more people become more and more visible with those. I'm seeing people with papers hanging off their windows, bumper stickers everywhere that are brand new that I've never seen before. People are concerned about all kinds of subjects that are out there, and that's kind of what we do every day here on the Gary Sutton Show, and especially here on a Friday morning. We're going to have Dan Kish here in a moment, who's from the Institute for Energy Research, and Dick Pandelides will be joining us today. Congressman Lou Barletta at 9:35 on the illegal immigration explosion. Was it planned? What needs to be done? Dr. Terry Madonna is going to be with us today, taking a look back on the week that was in politics. Clark Hodges on energy prices, and Amy Ridenhour will be with us today to get into the topic of, did big labor help create the border crisis? And then, what are you thinking? What are you talking about on Main Street? All here today on the Gary Sutton Show. Thank you for joining me this morning. Hope you're ready for a great day. Don't want to miss a second of this one. And we started out this morning with Dan Kish, Institute of Energy Research, Senior Vice President of Policy, and he's with us here on the Gary Sutton Show. Dan, great to have you on the show. Good morning to you.
Well, good morning.
Dan, one of the things that people are talking about, and I don't know if it's number one on the hit list today, but frankly, I just got to talk about something else other than the border and Obama and so forth for a few minutes, and yet it always comes back to him somewhat, is the Keystone XL Pipeline. And we concentrate an awful lot on the northern part that he has not yet approved, and yet we remember a couple of years ago where he stood in front of the southern part, over which he had no jurisdiction because it doesn't cross any international lines, and we find out this morning that the southern part is doing very well, thank you very much, and that's why you're here to tell us a little bit about that. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. We'll just, the southern part is up and running, and it cost $5.7 billion. They just went ahead and built the part to relieve some of the pressure on the southern leg, in essence. And they built it. It took 17 months, employed about 5,000 people, and of course many more people than that were involved in supplying them with the things that they need, and all of the equipment and all the rest. It brought $2.1 billion to Oklahoma's economy and $3.6 billion to the Texas economy, and it's up and running, and all's well, and nobody would even know it's there.
Well, let me ask you a question, Dan. How did it bring that money to the economy? People often throw these lines out, and they go, oh, yeah, well, yeah, and then someone spouts it later on. But what things happened as a result of this going on? What brought the $2.1 billion and the $5.7 billion?
Sure. Well, obviously it's a major construction project, so it involves a huge amount of wages. It involves the purchase of equipment and the maintenance of that equipment. It involves the servicing of that equipment. It involves the supplies that go along with it. I mean, these people have to be fed. They have to be housed. They have to be all of these things, down to the fact that they get haircuts. And they buy shoes, and, they buy Carhartts, and you name it.
You have to have a place to live, I guess, too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But my point in asking that was not to be a smart aleck. My point in asking that was to give people a Economics 101 lesson, that when you are out there making these kinds of things and creating these kinds of things, that it has just an absolute unbelievable networking effect out on the economy. And you see here in Oklahoma and Texas a combined total of $5.7 billion and nearly 5,000 jobs created in the process. One would say to themselves, geez, isn't that a good thing for America?
Well, yeah. I mean, anytime you add investment that's productive and makes sense, economic sense, unlike some of the stuff the government does, this is, it's organic economic growth, whether it's a factory or you name it, a retail shopping center. Before that, it was a field. Now it's providing income. It's spinning off taxes for localities. It's providing jobs for people who then have money to spend in the community. I mean, this is what it's all about. And writ large across the economy, the U.S., you need a huge number of things like that going in order to, lift everybody's boats. But that's basically the way it works. It's called economic growth, and investment is a good thing. Otherwise,
right.
They're investing somewhere else.
Let me ask you a couple questions. Number one, how many accidents have you had there so far? How many spills of oil? How many contaminants to the environment have happened there so far?
None. I mean,
okay. No, I would think from hearing other people out there that this is just an awful way of getting things done because it just desecrates the countryside. Let me ask you. I know I read a story this week where they're going to have earthquakes in Oklahoma, and they're worried about that now. So that was another, reason pulled out there about this. How many earthquakes have you had there that have disrupted this pipeline?
None.
None so far. How are the small towns doing that are there? Are they dying because of this? Are people moving out and moving away?
No, they're moving in.
That's interesting. So now I want to juxtapose the other end. I want to go to the places that would benefit maybe from a pipeline coming in from Canada, crossing the international boundary, which is why the president and the State Department are involved. And how are they doing so far? Are they benefiting at all from the question marks about whether or not they'll have the pipeline there, won't have the pipeline there, or whatever?
Zip. They're sitting on benches waiting for the president to figure out whether or not this pipeline's in the U.S. interest or not.
Do you think the president is going to approve this at any time in the near future? Not that he doesn't have a full plate right now with everything else that's going on, but fact is, I mean, it looks like it's totally, again, serving a group of people who are on the left, and especially when you got Tom Steyer pouring in and promising millions of dollars in the November election. If the president goes and approves the pipeline, Tom Steyer pulls the money out, right?
Yeah, I mean, Tom Steyer is committed to get $100 million together to support politicians. He's spending money in Pennsylvania right now. If you're hearing commercials by a group called Next Gen, those are Tom Steyer's commercials. That's money that he made developing coal mines in Australia, Indonesia, and other places out in Asia to serve coal to China. And, I mean, Indonesia's the largest exporter of coal in the world because of his investments that he made billions on, that he's now turned around and said, well, gee, we can't have these pipelines built because they'll produce oil, and that puts off carbon dioxide. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up.
Now, that brings me right to my next question, then. We're talking with Dan Kish, who's the Senior Vice President of Policy for the Institute for Energy Research. Obviously, he's got a point of view on this. But I read in a couple articles about the fact that it's not if the oil gets from the north to the south. They say it's already coming down via rail cars. And I asked myself the question, okay, if this is being brought down by by trucks, being brought down by trucks, isn't that far more laborious, far more unfriendly to the economy than if it was coming down through an enclosed pipeline in a much quicker and expeditious way, which would benefit our country in the long run? I wonder how in the world, because, people always say, well, if they don't build this, it won't come. I have heard that it is coming by truck. Am I wrong or right on that?
It's coming by truck and it's coming by rail.
Yeah. And so the point being, which is safer? Rail, truck, or pipeline?
Trucks are the least safe. Rail is the next safe. The safest by far is pipeline. I mean, obviously, when it's under the ground, it's kind of hard to bang into or go off the rails or run off the road or have an accident. We have 2.4 million miles of energy pipeline in the United States, Gary.
Yeah.
That deliver our gas to our houses, that deliver oil to from refineries to distribution points. That they're all. The reason we don't see them is because they're underground. The only pipeline we've got above ground in the United States is about 400 miles of the Alaska pipeline, where they can't put it underground because it would melt the ground.
Now, I remember we were scaring off the porcupine moose or something in Canada when we built that pipeline, allegedly, and that it stands above ground. in the kinds of pipelines we're talking about right now, one of the big concerns have been the aquifers, I think, up in Nebraska or North Dakota, something like that. Are those? Has that problem been taken care of? I understand Nebraska kind of cleared the way for that a few years ago.
Yeah, they actually went around a place they were concerned about, but I have to tell you, Gary, that was all made up too. To be honest with you, that aquifer that they're talking about,
yes,
is a huge aquifer that extends all the way down into Oklahoma and Texas, and it's had so many wells drilled through it. You know, remember, the United States has drilled more oil and gas wells than any other country, than the rest of the world combined, because we invented oil drilling right there in Titusville, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. Up in Erie, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea that a pipeline whose main goal is to keep the oil in the pipe, obviously, you don't want to have any kind of problems with somehow destroying an aquifer is absurd. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But nevertheless, because there was a lot of public stink about it, they moved it over a little bit. It still goes through the same aquifer, but it skirts some sand dunes that they were concerned about.
What kind of safety do you have built in on these pipelines when they're made? What's to say there can't be some kind of terrorism or eco-terrorism or something like that? Are there safety features built around it where you can't get to it, or there are things you can make sure keep it a little bit safer?
Well, first of all, it's underground, and it's underground significantly. So, number one, that's a pretty good,
I hate to interrupt you, but how far underground are these things?
Well, it depends on the terrain. I mean, 6, 8, 10 feet.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so we're talking significant depth, and if anybody was out there trying to dig it up, they'd be caught well before anything like that happened. The pipelines themselves, the way they work is it's like the various. Think about the water system in your house.
Mm-hmm.
You've got valves. You got the main valve shut off. You got valves going to the various things underneath the sink. You've got a valve, so if you have to replace something up on the in the faucet, you turn it off under the sink, and then you. That's what happens with modern pipelines, except it's automatic.
Right.
If there's a pressure drop, which tells them there's a leak. It automatically shuts off valves in the pipeline so that it's minimized. I can't tell you exactly how far these things are apart, but they've got them built into the system. They're all hooked up. It's all computerized. It's all you name it. These things are pretty miraculous. If people could see the technology, they'd.
One would assume that you're just not throwing in a big pipe and letting it go. We got less than a minute to go here, Dan.
Yep.
I wanted to, what's the final statement you would say to people right now? I have visions, by the way, of this getting approved about a week after the election's over, come this November. But with the president, we'll have even less to care about in terms of his legacy. So, what do you see in here out in your crystal ball?
Well, I can't tell you whether he's going to approve it or not. I mean, I'm beginning to believe he's not going to approve it. I will say this, though. When you hear all these sort of straw man arguments that are put up about this, that's what they are. This is not about the pipeline's safety or people worried about terrorism or anything else. This is about people who are dedicated to stopping the use of fossil energy in the United States. And so they throw up all these things to scare people. And they admit it's all about that, but it's about their global warming issue, and it's about the use of energy, which, by the way, is the thing that made us the number one economy in the world.
Yeah, it's about agenda, I think, over what is good policy for the country, and the fact that we do have to have a transition period to new forms of energy that'll be realistically able to be used for all of us. Dan, it's been an honor talking to you this morning. Thanks so much for taking the time and explaining some of this to me. I've got a little bit better look at the whole thing right now. And again, where can people go to find out more information about this?
EnergyTownHall.org.
Very good. EnergyTownHall.org. Dan Kish, thanks so much and have a great day.
Thank you, Gary. Same.